Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. Going to have a look at the weather next week, 10 days in today's video. This will take us to around the Easter period. We're also going to have a look at CFS V2 for the next month. That will take us off into April, of course. I'll begin by having a look at what's happening with the central temperature, because we have more cold weather over the past few days. B3 East Part 2 is pretty much over and done with now, and we are in recovery again from that Scandinavian high and easy winds that we had over the weekend. So we're going to see the temperatures gradually coming up over the next few days. It's going to be a bit of a slow process. And even then, nothing really get overly excited about. And then besides that, we might get another spell of northerly winds just in time for Easter. So, maybe not terribly good news, really, for the Easter bank holiday weekend. But there is a bit of disagreement about that. And by the way, there'll be the second Easter update coming up for you this evening. That'll be around 7 o'clock. We'll have a detailed look at the GFS, what it's showing for the whole of the Easter period. So, come back for that this evening around 7 o'clock. Got exciting news coming up later in the week as I'm finalising a competition. So I have more about that for you in the next day or so. So watch your space on that. Right, going to start off by having a look at the central England temperature from Hadley for March. So this is provisional up to yesterday, the 19th of March. And we're coming out at 4.2 degrees at the moment, which is an anomaly, again, below average, 1.1 degree below the old 61 to 1990 average. So that easy wind that we had over the weekend has pulled the central temperature down again, and it would be the case for the UK-wide temperatures as well. I think it's very, very likely now that this March is going to be coming out colder than average. The only question is how cold is it going to be. I don't think it'll be as cold as 2013. It'll probably be the coldest March since 2013. I don't think it will reach the level of cold that we had in March 2013, which was the coldest March since either 1962 or 1883, depending on which temperature series you look at. But it was a very, very cold March. I don't think this will be as cold as that. We didn't expect it to be. It would be quite unusual to get a March as cold as 2013 so soon after. I'm only talking about 5 years ago. So we never really expect this March to be as cold as 2013, but we did expect a cold month, and I think we are going to come out with a colder than average temperature for March 2018. It'll be very interesting to see exactly where we do come out in the end. Of course, that follows on from February, which was also colder than average at 2.9 degrees, an anomaly of nearly 1 degree below average. January was a milder than average month. For England and Wales, anyway, it was a colder month, though, up across Scotland. So, obviously, we are having a colder start to the year compared to the past few years, when actually it's been very warm in the early parts of the year. So, obviously, we are having a colder start to 2018. Whether that continues through the remainder of the year, of course, is very much open speculation at the moment. But definitely the start of 2018, first 3 months, first quarter, if you like, Q1, has been a lot colder than any year that we've had for quite a while. Right, GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles. Next, we're looking at Bath today, down towards Bristol. Someone's asked me to have a look at Bath. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Bath, and we're cold average at the moment still. That's just left over from B3 East Part 2. We're going to be seeing the temperature anomalies lifting up in the next few days, so we're going to unravel this cold weather, gradually turn things a little bit less cold or milder at the end of the week and into the weekend. Through the weekend into next week, looks like we go rather chilly again. And as we get towards the end of the month and the start of April, so that's kind of like the Easter period, which is around here, it does look as though we've got a cooling trend here. It looks like the GFS ensembles are increasingly shifting towards a renewed risk of cold weather around the Easter period. Now, I don't think it's going to be from the east, so you probably saw, probably seen in the newspapers today, a little bit of speculation about another beast from the east coming up for Easter. I don't think this cold weather, if it comes off around Easter, will be from easterly winds. It's more likely to be from Arctic northerly winds. But in any case, it's likely to be turning colder up towards Easter, I think, and certainly increasingly likely, but we'll turn it colder up towards Easter. And it's not a totally done deal. I'll show you the East Central Europe in a moment, where I'm just wavering slightly on it. But certainly increasingly likely that will turn things colder up towards Easter, and there is a chance that we might bring more snow. With northerly winds, that snow risk will perhaps be more for northern parts of the country, as opposed to the east. So places like Scotland and Northern Ireland may be getting a greater chance of snow with those northern winds. Of course, parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland haven't had all that much snow from these easters, so it might be that if it's going to even itself out a little bit for Easter. We'll have to wait and see about that. In terms of precipitation, a fair amount of dry weather over the next few days, but from the end of the week into the weekend and next week, it looks like it's turning more unsettled. So a pretty dismal outlook, really, from that ensemble, you have to say. Rainfall is plentiful after the next few days. It's going to be unsettled, and temperatures generally trending at or below average throughout, means that we're going to be in for a pretty cool and wet time of it as we go up towards the end of the month. This dismal spring continues. By the way, it is the first day of astronomical spring today, because it's the spring equinox, so the sun right now is around the equator, which means nights and days are of equal length. Beyond today, we're going to see the sun moving into the northern hemisphere, which means that days will become longer than nights, and so that is officially then into the start of spring and summer. The days will grow longer and longer. More sunshine will heat up the northern hemisphere as the sun is in our hemisphere, and so we'll move from spring in towards summer. So eventually, it's taking a long time to get, but eventually the weather will warm up and we will get some spring and summer warm. But it is at the moment looking a very long way off, you have to say. But inevitably, with the sun back in our hemisphere after today, we will soon be seeing temperatures having to respond and warm up. This is how the surface temperatures are looking for that. So we're starting off pretty chilly today, and we're going to see the temperature gradually picking up over the next few days, getting up towards 10 degrees Celsius. Certainly nothing to get excited about, and holding at around 10 degrees Celsius through the weekend into the start of next week. But then we have definitely got signs of a cooling trend through the course of next week. We go back underneath 10 degrees Celsius by the look of it, and some pretty cold nights showing up there as well. These are the minimum temperatures. A lot of ensemble members are taking those minimum temperatures to or below freezing as we get towards that Easter period once again. Temperature anomalies for the week ahead are looking like that from the 20th through 28th of March, coming out colder than average through virtually all parts of Europe, the UK and Ireland included in that. Precipitation anomalies generally a little bit on the drier than average side from the 20th to 28th, but I think these may well start to trend a bit wetter over the rest of the week. Haven't looked at this for a while. This is what's going on in America. So 3 distinct areas of temperature anomalies for the next week. We are cold on the eastern side of the state. So this is one of the scenarios where both the east of America and the west and north of Europe are both cold at the same time. So a lot of people think that if it's cold in the east of America, it will always be mild, wet and windy in Europe, and particularly the west of Europe. But not always the case. You can get it cold on both sides of the Atlantic, and that's one of the this is one of those situations. So cold on average the weekend in the east of America, warmer than average through the central states, and then colder than average again through the northwestern states of America. Precipitation anomalies look like that, significantly drier than average down in the southwestern states, otherwise looking quite wet, particularly so around California, or certainly central northern parts of California anyway, So some useful rainfall coming up for them in the week ahead. This is how the GFS is looking then for Saturday. Low pressure is around the country, so it's going to be quite unsettled over the weekend. I talked about this yesterday, so I won't go into too much detail about it again today. But the jet stream is in that sort of position, so we are keeping a trough within the 500 millibar flow, which means it looks pretty unsettled and also pretty cool as we go through the weekend. As long as we keep that jet stream on that sort of alignment to our south, we will be at risk of further cold interludes. That's how Sunday looks, probably quite cool and showery then. Into next week, and it's looking pretty unsettled through the early part of next week. Maybe a little bit milder, because the jet stream is moving northwards then. The jet stream is in that sort of position, so the trough in the 500 millibar flow is more across central and eastern parts of Europe, which possibly, particularly for the south, allows us to start bringing up some milder air from the central part of the Atlantic Ocean. But it doesn't last long. This is how things look with the GFS by the middle of next week, turning increasingly unsettled with bands of rain moving in from the Atlantic. And that continues up to the end of next week. This is Maundy Thursday, 28th of March, where we've got low pressure moving through the south, but you'll notice we are starting to draw down colder air from the north. So this colder air will be starting to bring wintry showers into Scotland. Probably quite a lot of heavy rain through this sort of area with that cold air maybe undercutting and producing some wintry weather. I'm not going to say too much about that because it's too far away, but it's certainly one of those situations that could either be very wet or maybe even a little bit wintry. The only thing that sort of negates it being quite wintry is the lateness of the year, but we know that we are unusually cold with the air mass at the moment. So it'll be a case of watch your space and see exactly what is going on there. It's not all that far away from the situation that produced the Easter flooding of Easter 1998. We're up to the 20th anniversary of that. But very unlikely we would get anything as severe as that. But it's not all that far away from that kind of pattern. We go through to Good Friday, and that low pressure moves away to our east and turns the winds into the north. That would be a cold northerly, bringing wintry showers wide across the country, probably significant snow to the north. There's the upper air temperatures, they're looking cold. We go through to Easter Saturday. Low pressure heads in from off the Atlantic. That's turning things wet and windy again. And then over the Easter weekend, we've got a little bit beyond day 10 now, but over the Easter weekend, we take that low pressure away to the east and return the winds to the north as well. No sign whatsoever here of genuine spring weather. It may get a little bit milder early next week, but it's not sustained more than a couple of days. And overall, it just looks generally quite cool, quite wet, and maybe cold, you would say, for Easter and even beyond. Not a terribly good outlook at all. This is the E78. Now, this isn't as cold as the GFS, so we start very similar next weekend, or at the weekend, looking unsettled with low pressure close to the country. Through the course of next week, there's that little push of milder air across southern parts of the country through the early part of next week. That could lift temperatures up to 13, 14 or 15 degrees in the south, and it would feel very pleasantly mild. So a little taste of spring, a little teaser of spring perhaps through the early part of next week. But then it turns increasingly unsettled as we run up towards Easter. This is day 10, Friday 30th of March, which is Good Friday, of course. Low pressure is very close to the country. It will be very unsettled. The only thing you would say with that is that it's nowhere near as cold as the GFS solution, because the low pressure is here. Let's change the colour. The low pressure is just out to our west, which maintains the winds off the Atlantic, albeit they're not especially mild winds, but they are Atlantic winds, whereas the GFS wants to actually be pulling down sort of Arctic northerly winds around this period, with the air originating somewhere up there. So differences between the two models. It may not turn out as cold for Easter as the GFS is suggesting, but you have to say that within the GFS ensembles there does appear to be quite a bit of agreement. Finally, just have a look at CFS V2 for the next month. So these are 500 millibar height anomalies broken down into weekly periods. The first week period taking us from the 20th through the 26th of March. Below average heights to the south, above average heights out to the west. The jet stream is doing something like that. This shows up the trough in the 500 millibar flow very well, and that's the reason we're bringing the air in from a northerly or northeasterly direction. It's because that trough within the 500 millibar flow is to our south, so the jet stream is to our south, and we're on the cold side of the jet. So cool and unsettled for the week ahead. Week 2 is looking like this. It's the 27th of March through to the 2nd of April with a deep trough centred over the UK and western parts of Europe. We've got ridging through the Atlantic and going up to our north as well, which pulls the winds in from a northerly direction. So this one also looking quite cold and unsettled through that Easter period with CFS V2. Week 3 looks like that. It's the 3rd through to the 9th of April with below average heights through the UK and a blocking signal up to the north. That is not what you want to be seeing in the middle of spring, because the jet stream is still going to be down here, and we'll still be pulling in the winds from a northerly or northeasterly direction. So that continues to look quite cold there as we're going into the early part of April. And then we go through to week 4, which is the 10th through to 16th of April. We're halfway through spring, meteorological spring anyway, and it still doesn't look all that good. The above average heights are to the southeast of Europe, so that's bringing very warm conditions there, but for us, we still have this blocking signal close to Greenland. We've still got this trough of below average heights centred somewhere around the UK. So, although it may be a little bit less cold with the air coming in from the Atlantic, overall, this still looks pretty chilly, I have to say, and the temperatures would still probably be a bit depressed and just rather unsettled and cool as we're going into the middle part of April. Still no signs there of genuine spring. Temperature anomalies in the week ahead are coming out substantially colder than average of the UK and for many parts of Europe as well. Week 2 temperature anomalies are also coming out colder than average. Week 3 temperature anomalies, they're colder than average too. And to round it all off, week 4 temperature anomalies, Wales not quite as cold as they are in the earlier weeks. They're still on the colder than average side, meaning that the next month is shaping up to be really very cool and unsettled as well, I'm afraid, if the CFS V2 is right. It might be it's going a bit over top with that cool signal, but you have to say certainly up to the next week or two, there's no sign of genuine spring. It may get a little bit more spring-like through the early part of next week, but we're only talking about a day or so, and then back to quite cool and unsettled conditions if the ECM is right. If the GFS is right, then we have that day or so of spring early next week, and then we're back more or less towards winter by Easter with the winds in from the north, risk of snow, certainly for northern parts of the country, and probably some quite hard night frost as well. So it's not a very good outlook for anybody that wants spring to get going. As I say, it's the spring equinox today. The sun is on the equator. After today, the sun will be in our hemisphere, which means the days will be longer than the nights, and inevitably, purely because of that fact, we will, before too much longer, have to see a response from the temperatures, and they'll have to start lifting up. But for the time being, there's no sign of genuine spring. It all looks rather cool, or even cold, and unsettled. Right, we'll have a detailed look at Easter this evening around 7 o'clock, so come back for that. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.